Well, welcome. We're back for another adventure into the Bible verse. Crickets.
Yeah.
All right. So,
People watching this, I'm sure we're applauding.
yeah, exactly.
For you at that moment.
Or just
That's right.
like gasping.
That's right.
Just
What does
how
it mean?
the epic, the
I'm sure that's exactly
the
what's
mystery of it all.
That's right.
Anyway, as we've been at it for the last 3 weeks, the three of us, you guys have had the pleasure of listening to us talk about the Bible, discovering what
Hopefully
the Bible
it's a
is.
pleasure.
I don't like that word, to be honest. The enjoyment.
Isn't that what pleasure is?
I know. I just think pleasure. I just the pleasure of seeing me on camera. Not really, but maybe.
Carrying on.
Yes. Carrying on, please.
We're doing a series about discovering what the Bible is, where it came from, and how we as Christians can engage it. Mainly just trying to provide helpful ways of reading, and so that we can just as a community just do better at learning from the Bible with humility and encouraging each other to grow as followers of Jesus.
Well, and a big thing for me going through this is the idea of stuff that I kind of wish someone would have told me maybe 20, 30 years ago when I started reading the Bible.
Before I went to school and paid a lot of money to learn it.
Yeah, just stuff that was I think it would be helpful. I'm like, oh, yeah, this would have been, this would have been good.
Absolutely. But last week, Kyle helped us learn. We talked about, he led us in a discussion about the misunderstanding of taking the Bible literally.
Yeah.
And then we introduced the alternative idea of taking the Bible seriously. And newsflash, they're not the same thing. But you can go back to last week's live stream and learn all about that. The reality with taking the Bible literally and taking the Bible seriously is that the former actually makes the latter impossible. But again, you can go back and watch the live stream about that. I'm not going to get into it. We already did that. But something that we focused on in that conversation about how letting go of biblical literalism can make the supposed contradictions be what they are, different perspectives with an internal consistency of God's truth.
That's right.
Now, it leaves room for mystery and a deeper trust in the scriptures' overarching narrative. And we have a past series about that. It's called God's Story for Dummies.
Go
check
take a look
out.
at that if you're interested.
Yeah, for sure. But this week, I want to talk to the guys about something really practical when it comes to reading the Bible, and that's different resources that exist that to help people like you and I interpret and understand the Bible well.
And again, just going back to that idea of the Bible is translated into English. Different language, different culture, different time, and some of that just doesn't carry over.
Exactly. So having little resources. Sorry, Kyle, what was that?
I was just going to say we need the extra help sometimes. So resources are so helpful.
Yeah. Reading the Bible requires a little bit of extra help. And you know what? The great thing is there's a lot of people who dedicate their lives to helping people learn from the Bible, studying it, but they study it in the original languages, the original context, providing ways of seeing the Bible's story come alive in our context today. And I know we've talked ad nauseum about how the Bible is not a book, it's a library, that it was written for us, but it wasn't written to us. And it's written in a different language, in a different culture, different times, like Jay just mentioned. Yeah. And those are really the keys. We made a joke about this before the podcast started, and now I'm just thinking. Now I'm just thinking about it. How we read.
We should have left the keys on the table.
How we read so these are the keys. Those things are the keys of how we read the Bible if we want to be humble and faithful to its meaning. And
don't pull out your keys out of your pocket, Kyle, and put them on the table. Don't pull out your keys.
The reality is we're wanting to read the Bible to know who God is and who we are in relation to Him, and so we just really want to be able to do that well. So I'm going to present to you some, but not all. This is not an exhaustive list, and and by no means an exhaustive prescription of resources that we can use.
It's probably more like this is an accessible list.
Exactly. Mainly, I'm trying to go for the stuff that pretty much all of us can use, and don't have to be a PhD
That's right.
in order to do it. So first off, I don't know if anybody knows this. Do you guys know this?
I don't know what you're going to ask me if I
Well,
know.
just let me know. I'm going to ask you.
I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
I'm gonna say maybe.
Do you know that there are actually stuff in the different translations of your Bible that we tend to typically skip over? I mean, I've barely only just started reading these things recently that are actually in the beginning of your translations that can help us when reading that translation of the Bible.
Yeah.
I'm kind of guy who skips over prologues most of the time, introductions. So more than likely, I did not know.
I
this
think most
until
people do. It's just like, let's get into the Bible.
That's good. Yeah.
Let's get to Genesis 1.
Let's just
in the
go in
beginning,
there
man.
and just find out, like-
that's what I'm looking for.
And that's where I'm get lost. Before.
So there are write-ups at the beginning of your Bible, and these write-ups actually explain how a translation was produced. It often alerts readers to the choices made in translating the original languages. And this is important so we can be aware of the unfortunate but nonetheless unavoidable biases of publishers, translators, editors, all that kind of stuff. The fact is, it's still humans translating, and translations are interpretations from an ancient language into a modern contemporary language. And so there's never a translation that can perfectly capture the meaning of the original text.
On that note, I think it's important to say this doesn't negate the authenticity of it. A lot of people will be like, "Oh, I don't like this translation," and they'll just completely throw it out the window because they don't agree with certain, like you said, biases, possibly editors' notes. And they'll be like, this is completely out the window.
And I mean, I think that's okay if someone knows enough about translation that they see enough problems with the translation, they can do that. At the end of the day, however, like Scott McKnight, who is a prolific New Testament scholar, he says that nonetheless, while they're infallible, they're not infallible. They are reliable nonetheless.
That's exactly.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, he even goes on to say where people who do have sometimes, like, we'll say preferences of translations, which is not really a bad thing. Like, you can have one that you could do like how it reads and stuff like that. But he just said most people who have that like are probably not people who have studied the Greek or know Greek to really have a really educated opinion on that. I think sometimes it's sort of like you can have a translation where like, I read it well because of just how they decided to flow it. And that's an okay thing.
Yeah, but it's also important to mix it up.
It is.
And just try different translations just to get, it's about getting a different perspective. That's what we've been talking about a lot, and just different perspectives, having a variety of translation perspectives at your disposal. And we live in a golden age of that.
I was going to say that another thing that they do quite often in a number of Bibles is sometimes they'll have a little write-ups before whatever book of the Bible you're going to read, like Matthew, and then sometimes, depending on what it'll talk a little bit, maybe it'll be about authorship, or it'll be about historical
themes,
context,
yeah.
a little bit about sort of maybe kind of points of maybe Matthew is trying to make that, again, can be really helpful for us and when we read.
I love those introductions. They
that
help me so much.
Absolutely. Well, that's what study Bibles are. They have a lot more going along with it. And yes, of course, there's going to be biases.
Absolutely.
But nonetheless, very helpful information that comes along with that. Especially for someone who's a new reader, a study Bible can be very
helpful. Yeah.
Very helpful. But the next resource that I want to talk about is something called commentaries. Now, you guys have both gone to Bible college.
Yep.
You know what a commentary is.
This is probably, to say for everyone listening, this is probably, in some of the stuff you're presenting, is probably maybe the least accessible because it is big books. There are some that are more accessible for sure, and we probably recommend those ones more because of that.
When Nikki and I moved in 2020, I had this massive bin, probably no bigger than this table of all my commentaries, and we're like, nope, this is too much to carry. So we literally put them on our front step, and we're like, we'll come back to them when I'm feeling stronger to carry them. And we came back, and they were gone. But I was like, someone
That
else
solved the problem for you, I guess.
someone else needed them more.
But nonetheless,
books.
there are more accessible ones. And what a commentary is a book that is written about a particular biblical text, a specific book of the Bible, goes either verse by verse, chapter by chapter. Sometimes they take a little bit more of a narrative approach, all different ways, but they talk about historical, cultural, literary, and the biblical or canonical context of that particular text. And like we said, they can be very technical, but there are definitely ones that are very practical for everyday application. And one that we might recommend is the NIV application commentary.
Very good.
Very written to be accessible for all readers.
And there's nice academic stuff in there too. So like you are getting that part. That's
Yeah. And they're written by biblical scholars, so it's those are fairly reliable. These are guys who have advanced degrees in the field. And women too, and we always suggest mixing up different types of authors from different types of backgrounds.
Yeah, it's really important.
I really compare this to even like movie commentaries or like DVDs. You're watching the special effects, special features, and there's a commentary in the movie. That's so helpful to understand why they made the movie a certain way, why they shot something a certain way. Same thing with biblical commentaries. It explains so much. And it's so easy to just read something and go past it, but this commentary has that a little bit of extra information that you might be missing that's so crucial.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the important another is still we ought to caution about the fact that like commentaries carry biases.
Absolutely.
But really, the best commentators are those who actually acknowledge their biases and offer counter views. And a good example of this that I found for me was in Craig R. Keener's New Covenant commentary on the letter of the Romans. He actually has a discussion about sexual ethics from Romans 1, where he actually presents views that are different than his own.
Yeah, and that's really important because another thing I've seen commentaries do is that they don't necessarily, they try to do their best. It's really hard to do this, but not let their bias be shown, but they'll show like, these are the three leading views of this. And
right.
They kind of present them and not one as, this is the one you really want to do. It's just like, here are the threes, and leave even us to sort of like come to maybe some conclusions.
Yeah, and that's what a good commentator does, is allows room for the person to make their own choices. And then also just commentaries are usually a part of a broader series. And so you can actually have like a consistency, but it's all different people working on it. So it's not just one person's view coming out in all of these things. And that's, like we said, extremely valuable to have those different perspectives. But moving on for non-readers, and I know there's a lot of people out there who just struggle to do the reading.
Yeah.
We live in a golden age where you don't have to in order to engage the Bible. There are audio Bibles, podcasts, and a variety of videos that can help with reading the Bible.
And we really recommend a lot of these because there's some that are excellent.
Absolutely. I mean, the first one that we're going to just put out there as the most accessible is the Bible Project.
Yeah, I was going to say, as we're thinking about the Bible Project, how I've said like it's things that I wish I'd have known when I started reading the Bible, things that I wish that existed when I started reading the Bible.
Yeah.
And that is the Bible Project.
Yeah.
Like that is one of the highest things on the list for me. And I really wish 20 years ago this existed.
I didn't even know the Bible Project existed until I came to Connections.
Wow.
And that just showcases that it was out of my...
Yeah.
I mean, it was pretty new when you showed up.
Yeah, that's true.
But
I didn't just show up out of nowhere, according to...
Yeah. The cool thing is they actually recently released an app which just makes it so much more accessible. They curate their YouTube videos in a variety of ways. You can learn by book, themes, words, collections, literary genre, and so forth.
And I'll just say, and just for people who are ADHD like myself, they're like 10 minutes at the most.
Yeah.
Like, so it's not a lot. It's like, okay, I can do that. And they're well animated, well spoken. Like just,
Yeah.
I love the animations.
It's such an artistically vibrant way of helping people learn the Bible too, which that appeals to, like, it appeals to a broad range of people.
Yeah.
and the
before
way they
Mich-
think and learn.
I was gonna say before Missional Community last night, we're diving into the Book of Mark a little bit as a Missional Community, and I liked watching the Bible Project's video because they had like little arrows going to this and little arrow, and the animation makes such a big impact because
it
you're
really
starting to
does.
see connections, you're starting to see how things flow, and Tim Mackey and what's the other gentleman's name?
Jonathan, I forget his last name.
They just put
Sorry,
things so
Jonathan.
simply. Yeah, it's so helpful.
Well, that and like especially my son, but my kids really enjoy it. But definitely Joseph, like he loves it, and he'll always make a comment on how the sound design. I don't know what. So the sound design is
That
amazing.
matters.
I don't know
That
what it does for
matters,
people,
and there's
but, like,
people who catch
that's-
on to that.
That's a big thing for him.
Well, think about how God uniquely designed each of us with a different learning style.
Yeah.
And like we said, these are helpful for the people who learn this way.
Right. They also, for people who want to read, but they have a way in their app to actually have a reading journey, and a way that they also have a feature that allows you to work on reading skills when it comes to reading the Bible. It's really just been a game changer for helping people learn how to read and be more knowledgeable about the Bible. And then podcasts. There are podcasts all over the place talking about the Bible. The Bible Project has their own, and there's so many other people who have good, like I think of the Bible for Normal People. That's a really good one too. And then for like actual just like reading the Bible, the user version Bible app has reading plans. Every English translation and many non-English translations, and all of them pretty much come with an audio version available that you don't have to necessarily read. You can listen. Speaking of audio platforms, one that I really like for people who are really like artistically oriented is Streetlights.
Yeah, that's really good.
They use artistic multimedia to bring the Bible to life. And so usually every like audio book of each book of the Bible they've done that comes with like some sort of ambient, hip hop, Latin, and all sorts of different influences into a soundtrack that accompanies the narration.
Is this Streetlights that's also associated with the street ministry for teenagers?
No, it's from
Okay.
Chicago.
Okay, I was just
Yeah.
wondering because I was like, that's cool that they're trying to appeal to the younger generation. Like
It was started by some musicians.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah. And then they also have some visual content on their YouTube channel. So there's something there for everybody. And then finally, the Lumo Project is a visual Bible that covers the Gospels. It actually just portrays Middle Eastern actors set in first century Palestine with the Gospels, which is really cool just to have that acted out as you listen to the Bible.
Yeah, and it's a narrator. I don't remember what translation.
You can get multiple there's multiple translations. Yeah.
So and it's the narrator speaking, and then you see the depiction being dramatically acted out, and it's I really come to like that a lot. And I remember actually talking to one person who not a reader at all, but like that was just the saving grace of having him really interact with the Gospels was the Lumo Project.
Wow.
And it just like every time I saw him, it would be like, oh, I really like this.
Yeah. And then I just want to mention one app that I use a lot. It's called Logos. It's really good for helping novice readers engage deeper study, like word studies, integration with English translations in the original languages. They actually, when you highlight a word, there's a panel that pops up with a word study. And then like the original Greek or Hebrew or whatever it is. And I really, really appreciate that when I need to kind of get a better sense of what the text is saying, especially with a specific word. And then we mentioned last week about how chapters and verses don't exist in the original text. You can actually turn that off in the Bible, in the Logos Bible app. And so you can read it without that and kind of get a different flavor, more like what it would have been for an ancient reader.
Yeah.
But Jay and Kyle, like, I just want to ask, like, what's some resources that you really like?
Well, I mean, the Bible Project. I mean, we just talked about that. That's just something I go back to quite a bit. Another thing that I have done in the past that I really enjoy is there's the Word of Promise audio Bible, which is it's sort of done like a radio drama. So it's the entire Bible done in the New King James Version. And they have actors, like kind of known actors. I think it came out maybe 15, 20 years ago. Like known actors, especially been, maybe not as current as today, like Richard Dreyfuss. He was in Jaws. Like that. I can't remember who he plays, but they have some significantly known actors playing specific characters in the Bible. And it's, again, you have the sound effects, you have the music and all that to kind of, if you're going for a walk or you're driving in your car, I've actually really quite enjoyed that. I'm a little more engaged in that than just a simple like audio Bible where it's one person talking. I really like that. And then, certain Bible commentaries that I've come to like is the Story of God Bible commentary, which is edited. One of the editors is Scott McKnight, who I'm just a big fan of, and then the New Covenant Bible commentary that you just sort of briefly talked about, edited by Michael Bird, someone else that and these are all biblical scholars that I've really come to respect, and I love the people that they platform and have asked, bring in and stuff like that, and they're really big on diversity and stuff like that. So those are a couple other things the bigger things that I've really come to like, and a lot of the stuff that we've already talked about. So.
Yeah, good ones there.
I'm just listening to you guys. Sorry. For me, I value my missional community that way. I don't know if this is a typical resource, is the fact that we're very much a diverse community. We have Grandma Bev, who offers a perspective that's so different than mine. Her upbringing is very different than mine. We got David and Faith, who have a very different upbringing than me. And just being able to communicate those things. Being like, hey guys, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
And they have their favorite translations, and being able to pair those, side by side and being like, okay, this is what I think, this is what you think, and being able to have an honest discussion.
Right. And you know what? That leads me into what I was
I
just
know,
about
as
to
I read your notes, I was like, oh wait.
Another valuable resource is
Just
reading the Bible with people who care about learning the Bible and following Jesus. Reading in community is vitally essential to understanding the Bible. I know that's redundant, but I'm going to say it again. Vitally essential to understanding the Bible.
It is. It's amazing. Like you can read, it's just a certain passage, story, whatever, and people who pick up on different nuances of the story that you just sort of like, oh, I just sort of read over that. And this is like, I would say my encouragement to anyone listening that is maybe hadn't really read of the Bible a lot or new to it. So quite often I think when we say like reading with people, it's more about like, oh, read with someone who knows a lot more than me, which good. I recommend that. But somebody who's new to it also, I've very much benefited from just something that they've seen that, again, I've glossed over, or just a perspective that I just, I think I just have never saw before, and just sort of like, oh, wow, yeah. It's because sometimes I think just our own histories can be the thing that limits how we see things. And it's so wonderful, especially people who don't have a history of Bible.
When I was in
we'll
youth,
see something. And it's just like, that is so amazing.
Yeah.
It's absolutely changed the way I've read certain things, just having done that with people.
That's one thing that I actually really enjoy about like children's and youth ministry. You get like this little grade oneer who has a perspective of something that you're like, oh, you're so innocent. But at the same time,
well, that's really good.
Childlike, you're like
profound even.
You're amazing that you figured this out,
Yeah.
And and sometimes
Out of the lips of babes, right?
okay. It's not to negate that. I was going to also say, it's not that I just use community. I love all these ones that we were talking about, and I'm nodding myself along, being like, yeah, I do that. I should try to do that more. But the community for me is so much important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned in the first podcast about authorship and that it was authored in community and meant to be read in community anyway. We're actually following exactly what the Bible was meant to do when we do that. We need our interpretation to be completed by other people because on our own, it's not going to capture everything that we could possibly know about God. And as much as we are limited as human beings, it brings us closer to being at a place of understanding and humility and growth and faithfulness that just is impossible on your own.
Well, even what we said, I think a few times, like to get to the understanding of anything, it's we got to come to some sort of original intent, and it was originally intended
Yeah.
to be read and spoken as a community.
Well,
All of it.
the Bible itself is that very act taking place. It's a record of the community of God's people in conversation with each other over time and location, wrestling with the will of God.
Yeah.
And Michael F. Bird puts it like this in his book, 7 Things I Wish I Knew About the Bible. If we got Isaiah, Haggai, Paul, Luke, and John together to have a conversation on the meaning of creation, salvation, ethics, worship, or love, what would each one bring to the conversation? And I think that's just like so cool to think about.
Yep.
Imagine that. And that's exactly what you do when you read the Bible. The more of the Bible you read, you're actually bringing that into the next thing that you read. Yeah. And then, so this just brings us to the final and most important resource we have for reading the Bible. Dun, dun, dun. The Bible itself.
If we haven't said it enough, or if we have said it at all, the best resource for the Bible is the Bible itself.
It is. Because the Bible...
Let me explain that a little bit. Though.
Yeah, I'm going to do that. Because the texts of the Bible, they came into existence, like as this happened, like they were established through oral tradition and then acknowledged as a revealed word from God. Other biblical authors used those texts and traditions to interpret, understand, and reinterpret God's work in the world and through his people. And this led to new parts of the Bible being written, though those people didn't necessarily think this was going to be brought together into like a sacred text at once. They just writing about God and his will and what they learned from the texts that were affirmed by the community as revealed word of God. This was most evident for Christians will recognize this as New Testament authors, because they were actually, with their experience of Jesus in the flesh, or either firsthand or otherwise, they were actually reinterpreting Old Testament texts, right? In light of who Jesus is, and discovered how the Old Testament was pointing to him all along.
What is that Philip Yancey book, The Bible That Jesus Read?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and talks about that.
Oh, that's one I'm going to have to add to the list.
That's a good one.
But a good example of this is Isaiah 53, and it's known as the Suffering Servant song. And there's a literary character in Isaiah that the original readers of Isaiah would have been like, this is a character, this is something that's supposed to portray a suffering servant that suffers on behalf of God's people, and represents God to the people in that suffering. There's a sense that God is substituting himself for the sins of the people, by having a human servant who is deemed worthy to suffer for the people and satisfy the penalty of their sin. The original readers would not concluded, oh, that must be Jesus. They didn't even know who Jesus was. They may have had an idea about the Messiah, maybe, the Jewish Messiah.
Some sort of...
they may have thought of it as a prophet or a priest or a king, but nonetheless, it was just a mere human. They didn't think of it as a divine a human in like God in the flesh. But the New Testament writers, they're like, wait.
Yeah. I'm connecting some dots
Yeah,
here.
exactly. And
Or Jesus just connecting them himself.
And they quote a lot of stuff from Isaiah. For example, in Matthew 8:17, he took up our infirmities and bore our diseases. In fact, for those listening out there's around 280 direct quotations from the Old Testament in the New Testament. And that doesn't even count all the allusions and indirect references that take place in the Bible.
And a lot of Bibles will have little notes that will say, like, see this verse. And you'll be like, oh, and you'll be able to actually like go back. And
Yeah, you can go and figure out where that's coming from. And
it's so helpful.
Yeah. But the Bible itself just carries an internal consistency that when you read it and you take all the keys that we've been kind of talking about, it really comes alive. You start to notice it, pay attention to it. If you think something is referencing the Old Testament because it makes you think of the Old Testament, it probably is.
Yeah.
But just to wrap this up, this has been a great conversation, by the way.
Yeah.
This really only scratches the surface of what exists to help you understand and read the Bible well. But we all believe these are really good places to start.
Yep.
The most important thing is that we keep discovering and rediscovering the God of the Bible. That's the key. Because the story of the Bible is God revealing himself through the story of humanity. And he did that mostly through Jesus, and it climaxed in Jesus revealing himself in humanity. And one day it'll culminate in a renewed kingdom, heaven and earth restored, right? Basically, the Bible is just is there to help us place ourselves in that story. But we need to read it. We need to read that story to do it. So we want you to know, we want you to read the Bible, and we hope that everything we're talking about is helping you do that.
Maybe what we will do is we'll make sure that in either some of the notes and stuff like that,
Yes,
we'll put some links to some of the things,
absolutely,
like the street lights and the Bible Project. If you don't know about it, make sure that you can find that easily enough.
Yeah. I'd be curious, for those who are listening, let us know what you use.
Yeah.
Some maybe in the comments, maybe you talk to one of us on a Sunday, or give us a call, text, whatever. Let's all learn together and grow together.
All right.
All right.
Well, we'll see you next week.